Hi, alternates. Welcome back. So it's day 3 of the Karen retrial, and it was a short day. So let's get into it. Day 3 began with Daniel Whitley on the stand. He was the firefighter and EMT back on the stand from cross-examination yesterday. And during this cross-examination, the defense was holding Whitley's feet to the fire with regards to the psychiatric watch that Karen was under right after finding John. Specifically, during the grand jury hearing in 2022, this witness testified that he believed that Karen didn't want to give a urine sample. But on day 2 of this retrial, he testified with certainty that she didn't want to give a urine sample. The defense went in real hard because he wanted to show the jury that language is important. He was trying to discredit this witness. And he did, because ultimately it was proven that Karen did give a urine sample. Then, for this witness, there was the issue of a question that Karen had allegedly asked Whitley having to do with hypothermia. So I want to play it for you right here. This is what happened in 2022 during that grand jury hearing.
Quote, what, if any, questions did she ask you regarding hypothermia? Do you remember that question?
I do.
Your answer was, she was just wondering if he could have survived outside in the cold even though he didn't have a jacket on. Do you remember giving that answer?
I do.
2024, last year, Mr. Lally asked you, so Firefighter Whitley, at some point, specific to your conversations with the defendant, Ms. Reed, can you describe sort of her demeanor or any observations you made in relation to that as you were speaking with her? And your answer was, yes. She was very upset. She kept asking if there was any chance. She kept asking us if we knew if the person Ambulance 1 had transported was alive or dead, and we could not speak to that. She asked if somebody could be alive in the snow without a jacket for many hours, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Brennan said, can you share with the jury what those conversations were about? And your answer was, so we were talking, she was upset. She kept asking if there was any chance her husband could be alive even sitting outside in the snow without any coat for many hours. Do you recall that answer that you gave yesterday on direct examination?
Yes.
So the defense went in hard about this many hours issues versus even the mention of John sitting in the snow. You know, you do what you want with that, but I know that the defense spent a lot of time on this. There was quite a bit of back and forth with the judge and the defense attorney because he kept telling the witness to answer the question yes or no. All right. After Whitley stepped down, the Commonwealth played a media clip of Karen Reed. It was dated April 13th, 2014, and it was simply Karen talking about something that John's mother had said to her. There was no reference to a date or a time when she would have said this, but Karen Reed said that John's mom leaned over the island and said, quote, I feel like he got hit by a car. It looks like he got hit by a car, end quote. And Karen had a real attitude about how she was saying this. So I expect, or I'm sure that the prosecution will plan on using that video at some point, or at least the audio. So before I discuss the next 2 witnesses, let me explain something real quick. If any party at a trial wants to introduce evidence, they need to do so through a witness, and they need to lay the foundation for that specific piece of evidence. So any type of surveillance video, you need to bring someone in typically from wherever that surveillance video is kept, typically someone responsible for overseeing that specific footage. Okay. So the next 2 witnesses on day 3 were very brief. Like if you blinked, you missed it. And they were brought in to lay the foundation for surveillance videos at the 2 bars that night. First up was Jean Demolis, the general manager for the McCarthy's Bar and Grill. She was the one who provided the surveillance video to the investigators who requested it specifically for the night of January 28th, 2022. The video was briefly played for the jury, but just a few seconds to ask Jean, hey, is this an accurate representation of what McCarthy's looked like on the day in question? After this, Bridget Meehan took the stand. She was one of the owners of the Waterfall Bar and Grill. I have a really hard time saying Waterfall. The video of the waterfall was introduced through this witness. All right. Next up was Michael Camerano. He's a 48-year-old Canton local who was friends with John. They met in 2013 and spent a lot of time together over the years. Michael had a daughter similar in age to John's niece. Michael testified that he spoke to John and even hung out with him on January 28th because their daughters had gotten accepted into a school and they wanted to celebrate. That day, Michael and his daughter went over to John's house and it was just the four of them, the two dads and the two daughters. So you'll probably notice that throughout this trial, I'm going to refer to John as a dad because that's what I feel like he was to his niece and nephew. So while the four were celebrating at John's house, the two men decided to go out and celebrate on their own. So they left the girls at the house and together in Michael's car, they headed towards McCarthy's that night. Michael testified that while at McCarthy's, a friend named Kirk joined them and that Karen arrived about an hour after they got to that bar. He didn't see any issues with the couple. They hugged and kissed and everything seemed normal. But Michael wasn't there all night because sometime between 9:30 and 10 p.m., he had to leave because his son had gotten injured at a friend's house. Eventually, Michael testified that he went home and went to bed and that he woke up to various missed phone calls from both his wife and Karen. By the way, I don't know who his wife is and he never mentions her by name. After Michael speaks to his wife, he drives over to John's house and picks up Kaylee. This was between 5 and 6 a.m. Now, Kaylee is John's niece. Hours later, someone named Paul called him and told him to bring Kaylee home. At that point, Michael heard that John was dead, but he didn't want to be the one to tell Kaylee. He did mention that Kaylee had a feeling that something was wrong because when he was on his way to drop her off home, she really didn't want to go. Michael was really nervous during his testimony. You could see in his testimony that he was trying to hold back his emotions, which really brings this entire case into perspective, right? There's an actual person who has died. Michael further testified that he got along very well with Karen. He trusted her with his kids, and John never mentioned wanting to break up with Karen. And that besides the fact that John sometimes got upset that Karen bought his niece and nephew expensive things, they didn't really argue a lot. After Michael left the stand, the Commonwealth called Nicholas Guarino to the stand. And this exchange, I'm going to admit it, it was really boring. Through this witness, who you met on day 2, well, they introduced call logs, text logs between Karen and John, between John and Jen McCabe, between Karen and Carrie, and even a group chat with another couple and Karen. But for today, they only read aloud text and call logs between Karen and John for January 28th from 9 o'clock in the morning until 8:30 p.m. I'm not going to read the entire log because it took a really long time, but let me just draw your attention to some of the context that day. Basically, these are the text messages. Karen told John that she was hurt by something that he had said. He said something like he had been putting up his guard for 8 years and he can't trust anyone and he's been hurt. And Karen's like, I'm not everybody. I'm not going to hurt you. And honestly, if you're not Karen or John, these initial text messages are vague. You can tell, just a couple having discord about feelings. But at 2:16 p.m., we get a little more meat to the text messages. Karen texts, I feel pretty shitty about how this morning went down. I know you said sorry, but it really stung, especially when I've been pretty hard lately. I feel like a loser turning around, just coming back over after everything you said. Now, that was at 2:16 p.m. Then, 10 minutes later, Karen starts leaning into this entire, is there someone else? If there is, I'll never see you again. What's going on? John says no, and then he says that things haven't been great between them for a while, and he wondered if she had ever just considered that. They speak for a few minutes over the actual phone, and then minutes later, Karen calls John, and the call is rejected. Now, the state trooper explains that a rejected call is different than a missed call, and these calls were actually rejected, John was pressing the red button. Then comes the real substance. It's kind of brief, but the night prior, Karen brought up the future, to which John responded something like, yeah, what about the future? So now we're getting somewhere. Mind you, remember, this couple has been together for 2 years. Karen was offended by that specific conversation the night prior. But John was like, that's not even how it went down. He's trying to downplay her feelings. But Karen keeps haggling John about whether or not he's into this, which presumably she's talking about the relationship. Again, she asks, is there someone else? And then John sends the rolling eyes emoji, She calls. Karen keeps calling John and he keeps rejecting her calls, at which point, I was getting annoyed. He says he doesn't want to talk because one of his kids is right there. Then Karen tells John that she's going to grab a drink in a bit. He's like, all right, well, don't make an announcement about it. Just go. She says, I want to see if you want to meet up later. And mind you, in between all of these text messages, there are so many rejected calls. But John says he can't talk because Kaylee is right there. And then at some point during this text exchange, his dad shows up at the house. Eventually, John does answer one of Karen's calls, and they speak for about 5 minutes. And this is just before 3 p.m. Minutes after that call ends, she says, why don't you meet me at Hillside at 4:30/5 p.m.? John says he can't because he has to take his kid to the doctor and then practice. Karen says that she wants to give him space, so she wants to meet out somewhere else rather than at the house. Now, at 3:30 p.m., Karen asks him if he has plans to go out later. He says he doesn't know. And then there's more text messages. At about 3:40 p.m., Karen sends her last text for now. Then, at 4:40 p.m., John reinitiates. He texts her, what's your plans? She's home and has no plans. By 5:02, he's like, so are you staying home or are you coming here? Now, clearly, this is a relationship where they probably have this argument all the time. Then there is a brief discussion about the blizzard, about the weather, and then Karen sends this message, quote, I don't want to keep having this constant conflict of the dynamic of the four of us. The harder I try, the more it kills our relationship as a couple. It feels like utter shit to be in this position. Rather just meet you out for drinks when you figure out what your night looks like. At which point, John responds, all right, do what you want. At 5:19, he sends a text message that says, why don't you come over? Are you getting tired of this relationship, right? So then John says, I just got sober over an hour ago. Then there's talk about some bill payments. And then there's this weird, are you really not going to accept my friend request from Karen? Now, when she says this, she's actually talking about Facebook, which I was confused. Like, isn't that your boyfriend? Then Karen says, quote, yeah, we have been going out for 2 years, end quote. But wait, then John clarifies. He says he hasn't been on Facebook for a while and that she defriended him over a year ago. Again, this is a 40-year-old couple that are defriending each other on Facebook. At about 6:05 p.m., Karen lets John know that Carrie texted and that they're going to go out later, meaning like there's a group going out. At 7:06 p.m., John tells Karen that they are heading out and asks for her plan. Like, what are your plans? By 7:14 p.m., John tells Karen it's McCarthy's. Karen responds that she's waiting for a plumber neighbor who is going to look at her hot water heater. At which point, there's this weird, jealous exchange with John talking about the plumber, and it's pretty boring, really, after that. All I can say is it's a mess. But by 7:41 p.m., McCarthy's is a done deal. That's where John is going, and Karen is going to meet him there after the plumber situation. Then the topic of where Karen is staying that night comes up. She seems to believe that she will be returning back to her house, and John says, so you're going home tonight? Then John says something like, oh, don't worry about the hot water heater. You're probably going to be in Canton until Monday. Remember, she doesn't live in Canton. She lives in Mansfield. The last text message that was read on day 3 of trial was at 8:35 p.m., where Karen was heading out to McCarthy's. There are more text messages from that night, but that will be in a different compilation, and I guess that we will get to that when we get to it. After this witness stepped away, the prosecution introduced a few media clips of Karen talking about how many drinks she had. The first clip was a 2020 clip from September 27th, 2023, where Karen says that she probably had about 4 drinks, but not more than 6. Then there is the Karen Reed interview with Gretchen Voss on June 20th, 2023, where she says she had a normal amount to drink, a vodka tonic every 40 minutes. She said that she definitely felt buzzed. The next clip is from June 15th, 2024, and here is Karen.
The final count of my alcohol intakes, probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest vodka tonic. It tasted just like all soda water with lime. Not that I need it to be a martini, but it might have had a splash of vodka in it. So I said, John, this drink tastes like it has no vodka in it. And he said, just get a shot and mix it yourself. So each drink was being counted as a double. So I would get a vodka tonic, and then I would pour a shot into it, so that would count as 2. But frankly, it just felt like a regular cocktail. It was just a really weak pour, so I asked for a shot. So for my taste, it just tasted like that's the normal strength of what a drink should be. So I had maybe 2 or 3 that are being counted as 4 and 6. And I don't know. I felt fine. I felt like I was buzzed. And then there was one drink, the last one that was given to me, which I would have counted as 3, but they're counting as my 6th cocktail. The guys that we were with brought around shots, and they gave me one that I didn't drink, but I poured it in my drink. So that's now my 5th and 6th drinks, with the 7th, which is a shot that all the men did, and I poured it. So that one glass that I'm holding, that I go into the Waterfall with, has 3 drinks in it, a vodka tonic and 2 shots. And which is why John said to me, you're not leaving that drink here, like you haven't touched it and just poured a bunch of vodka. He's like, just take it with you, which was something he always did. So then I go into Waterfall, and I put that drink down and I would socialize most of the time. So that would have been my 5th, 6th, and 7th drinks. Then John orders me a drink, the Waterfall, that I don't drink, that he takes with him. And then there was a round of shots that Chris Howard bought that I did take. So that would have been the night. But I did not consume 9 vodka martinis or take 9 shots, depending on how you count it. And the last 2 drinks I didn't touch. I mean, I'm not as clear as I would be if I hadn't been drinking. I mean, I had drank, so, and that led me to question, like, could I have hit him? Did I run over his foot or hit him in the knee? Did I incapacitate him? I mean, I always drive with my music blasting ever since I was 16, and I know when John got out of the car to go into Fairview, I know my car was blasting because when I got in it the next morning to go look for him, I had to immediately turn it down. And I don't know, it's stormy. I have had a few cocktails. I didn't black out, but I wasn't as lucid as I would have been if I had gone to bed at 9 and drank a tea. But so I was fuzzier than I would have been if I had had no alcohol.
Now, alternates, can you see why the prosecution is showing all of these videos to the jury? Yeah, because there are a lot of different versions of what happened. And wait, there was one last video. In that last video of the day, Karen admitted that she shouldn't have been driving that night. And she even says that she knew that she shouldn't have been driving that night because she didn't get on the highway. Because according to her, when she drinks a little bit too much, she drives extra slow, which is not how you want to be driving on the highway. She claimed that on that night after the Waterfall and even at 5 a.m., she was a safe driver. All right, everyone, that was the end of day 3. It ended early due to a mix-up with witnesses, and the judge told the jury to expect to be going on a field trip on day 4, and also to expect another half day. She did say that they were still on track for their estimated 6-week trial. With that, alternates, day 3 is in the books. Thank you so much for all of your support in the last few days. Be sure that you follow and subscribe to the show wherever you're watching or listening. And if you're digging these daily episodes, let us know in the comments and in your reviews.